My name is I'm the Director of Conservation Programs at the Westchester Land Trust. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to join us. This is the third and final workshop of the Hudson Conservation Initiative, and we're so pleased to be here at Greenwich Audubon today. I want to say thank you to all of the staff at Audubon Greenwich for graciously welcoming us. This was a last-minute shift of locations. We were planning to do this workshop at Westchester Land Trust headquarters, and due to the amount of snow that we have in our parking lot and a few leaks that we have, we had to do a last-minute shift here. And I will say that we were graciously welcomed. It was a real seamless shift, and we were met with enthusiasm and support for this initiative, which speaks to all of you. And we've been getting that support pretty much along the way, and it's really building every day. So we have a really wonderful workshop planned for you today, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Tyrrell and her crew from SFFI. I will say that there are extra binders if anybody needs them, and at 1 o'clock today we're going to be joined by Ted Gilman, who's a senior naturalist here at Audubon Greenwich, just to say a few words about the work that they're doing here. So thank you all very much.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm Mary Tyrrell at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. I lead the Sustaining Family Forest Initiative, which is the umbrella under which all of this work is done. Can you hear me in the back okay?
Yes.
Great. And again, if you don't have a binder, if you were not at the first workshop and don't have a binder, we have a few extras. If you were at the last workshop, we hope you brought your binder with you. So what we're going to do today, we have, first of all, I'm incredibly impressed that so many people want to spend their entire weekend in this workshop. It's very, very impressive. It says an awful lot about your dedication to the Hudson project and your interest in learning what we have to teach you about how to do hopefully a better and more effective job at engaging landowners. That's what we're all about. By the end of tomorrow, you will have learned something more about targeted marketing, social marketing. I did a very brief overview when we met last time, but today we're going to have a much more in-depth explanation of all that, why it matters, why you really should think along those lines when you're working with landowners, trying to bring new landowners into stewardship and conservation behaviors. It's all about reaching new people, right? It's not about people you already know. So that's what we're talking about for 2 whole days. How do you reach people you don't already know, new people who can really have an impact on the landscape? So this morning we're going to mostly talk at you a bit, although we have a few participatory things that will happen as well. Starting this afternoon, you're going to break into smaller groups. There are 4 groups, and I hope you all know which group you're in, right? If you don't, you can check with Bill or one of the other organizers. And the rest of the time today and all of tomorrow, you'll be working in those groups to work through a systematic process of how you think about doing your landowner outreach. Starting from what are your objectives, what are you trying to achieve, and then getting to finally, how do you reach these, what's your audience, how do you best reach them, what kind of messages and materials work best, what channels work best, and then finally, my favorite part, how do you know that you're actually achieving something? So evaluation is really important. It's the last thing we do. People tend to get a little bit on the weary side by then. This is an intensive experience. You're going to work hard. We're all going to work hard. So you'll be a little bit tired by the end of tomorrow, but save that wee bit of energy you need for evaluation thinking. So first I want to introduce my team. Parma Chalwa at the Center for Nonprofit Strategies. Ravi Singh, Center for Nonprofit Strategies. Emma Kravitz, she's the program manager for the Tele program at Yale. And Rachel Porecki, who's our fantastic student assistant this year. She's getting her Master of Forestry degree at Yale in May. Okay, I want to tell you a little bit about background, about the SFFI, especially, I did a little bit about this last time, but I'll refresh your memories and also for the new folks so you'll be caught up with everybody. And then we'll go around and do introductions very briefly. just think about it. If everybody takes 1 minute, we'll take 50 minutes to do introductions. We can't do that. Okay. So the Sustaining Family Forest Initiative, we've been around for 10 years. And we started with a coalition across the country of organizations that have been working on private landowner forestry and conservation for a long time. And we got together and said, you know, we're still reaching the 20 to maybe 25% of the landowners that we've always reached. What the heck about the other 80%? How do we figure out who are they, what are their needs, what are their attitudes towards forestry, towards forest management, towards stewardship, towards conservation? We don't really know much about them. So we set out doing a research project based on the consensus of this group. And we used the National Woodland Owner Survey, which I'll talk about more later, which is a national survey done by the U.S. Forest Service. It's the best data we have on landowners in the U.S. But we didn't just look at that and produce sort of the typical kind of data that usually comes out of those things. We then started to use this social marketing approach, which Carter was going to talk a lot about. How do you think about these landowners in a different way? How do you think about selling them things like you're trying to sell behavior, right? And just like marketers try to sell products. So we did all this analysis. We produced huge reports. If anybody wants to see them, what's the website? sffi.yale.edu. They're all parked there. You probably won't want to do that because then we realized, you know, okay, this is great, but we need to make this accessible to folks like yourselves. Folks who work for state forestry and wildlife agencies, for NRCS, extension, for land trusts, and other kind of conservation groups. And they're not going to go and read these scientific reports. So that's when we started thinking about how do we package this, how do we get it up in a format that's going to be useful to folks like yourself. So we have a couple of ways to do that. We have a website, and hopefully you've checked that out at some point, which talks about what do we mean about trying to do landowner outreach in a targeted way, how do you develop a communication plan, and the data is on there in a more, we think, useful format than just tables, which typically is what you get. And then we realized that wasn't sufficient either. You know, sometimes you think, oh, we'll produce it, they will come, but it doesn't really work that way, right? So some people did, but, and that's when we developed this format of workshops, and they work really well. We've done these, how many, Emma, do you haven't remembered? No, we've done probably, I don't know, 20 or so over the last few years, all over the country. We've done concentration in the Northeast for sure, but we also have done them out west, we've done them in the Midwest, and just one in the South. We're going to be doing a couple more in the South this coming year. And we get to do one in Hawaii in May. I got lots of volunteers already, a couple more. Okay, so that's sort of who we are. We are a strong partnership between the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, the U.S. Forest Service, particularly the National Woodland Owners Survey, part of the Forest Service, which is under what's called their Family Forest Research Center, which is co-located at the University of Massachusetts, and the Center for Nonprofit Strategy. So those three really strong partners are working together now. Where we're heading is we're going to be producing a set of case studies, and we're now thinking about what that means and how to make. So what we want to do is how do we make what all the folks we're working with, they're learning a lot, right? They learn from us, and then they go off and apply these techniques, and then they learn something from that. How do we figure out how to share that learning, how to sort of get that out there to folks? So that's one of the ways we're thinking about this is through case studies. We're going to develop an evaluation framework. All right, all this is great, but how do we know there's a difference on the landscape because of all this, right? So we're going to be working strongly with a lot of groups on what they're doing for their outreach, what kind of landowner behavior changes they're seeing, and then how do you actually see what's the effect on the landscape from that. And we will, the H2H are one of those groups that we will stick with. We pick a few strong partnerships that we stick with through this and say, all right, how are you doing this? How is it working? What's not working? So we'll be project advisors as we go along, as you go along with what you're doing. I think that's enough about us. Any questions? Who we are? What we're doing? No. Okay, great. Okay. 30 seconds. Okay.
I have 2 8-year-old kids, man. What are we doing these Saturdays? You want to do this on the weekdays?
Okay, it's incredibly impressive to me to see this many conservation organizations coming together to work, to try to figure out how to work together to up the ante on land stewardship and conservation. I mean, I live in Connecticut. I know we have almost as many land trusts as towns, and I know how infrequently we work together and how difficult it is to do that. And I know most of you are all volunteer organizations. I applaud you. I think this is really terrific. So I expect we're going to have a great 2 days with you folks. Okay, we want to do a little exercise. Take a few minutes and write this down so it helps your thinking process. You to think about the landowner outreach, you and your partners, however you want to define that, your organization, up to you to define that. Think about the outreach you're doing now. What grade would you give yourself and why? Take a few minutes to think about that. So we need a few brave souls to just yell out, Yes?
Give us the chance to deep, because we don't have enough people with enough time to do all the things like it's not a lack of ideas, it's a lack of time and energy.
Anybody else? Yes.
Well, I gave Sonia Longbon a C+. We've done a fair amount of outreach to our sanctuary neighbors and landowners who abut and are close by to the sanctuaries and try to engage them in best practices. We've had some memorandums of understanding with adjacent landowners. And we've also done some broader public education with pamphlets and things about best practices to do on managing your property, but we haven't really done more outreach targeted on specific individuals, so that's where we need to focus on things.
Panner's Land Conservancy, I give us charitably a C+ as well. We've done a lot of town mapping and identified landowners that are around certain critical areas we think, whether there are preserves or whatever. And then we try to integrate that with some of our educational outreach, on-site educational outreach. But again, it's time, it's energy, a lot of ideas, but a lack of resources as well.
Yeah, we're from Somers, and I would say that we're sort of on the same page with Panner's and speak to the same issue, same project.
Well, yes.
I would give us a C on a couple of things and a B- on others. We don't have a body of people. We don't have a group dedicated to this. So it's all doesn't have enough of a group behind the outreach programs to get into it. So we float something out and then follow on.
Yes.
I think we should be careful not to grade ourselves too hard, too. Partly it's knowing on what scale you should be giving this grade. And,
It's up to you. You pick the scale. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
Bob Ecker, Newtown Forest. We have a proactive approach to land acquisition now with a specific committee that is given that priority, and we have a list of priorities. As far as engaging landowners from a stewardship standpoint, we have yet to do that, other than the fact that we have been establishing ourselves as a lead by example organization and doing large-scale projects so that we have basically the credibility to actually approach these folks.
To Grace? You don't have to.
I would say B plus, with the amount of group, the amount of people we have, which is small.
Jenny Gwynn from Greenwich. We gave ourselves a C, generously, I think. We feel like we're a little passive in terms of overall outreach, and we tend to focus on a certain project, potential acquisition that we're working on, rather than talking to landowners who might, in 5 or 10 years think about giving land. We're more about what we can get our hands on today or next year, as opposed to the long term, which I'm hoping this will help us think about.
Yes. Lori Wallace Broggs, I would give ourselves a B plus. We have an extensive database of every landowner in the Great Swamp watershed, and as much information about them, because we know many of them personally. We talk to them on the basis of creatures, mostly birds, because we work with Bedford Audubon and the Waterman Bird Club. We're giving a lot of bird walks. We have a lot of birders on our own staff. Turtles, bobcats, other things we're doing research on. Landowners are really interested in what's on their property, and even though sometimes that interest is a negative, like, do I have a endangered species or something horrible like that? Or, wow, I love it, I love it, and I want to know more about it. We are not a land trust, although we can act as one, so we do not go to the next step and talk about stewardship or acquired land. The only stewardship we talk about is when we say, well, Ellie, how can I have more birds? Or how can I have more turtles, etc. So we get so far, but we're not the type of organization that generally prefers to go the other way. Maybe a couple more? Yeah.
Might as well fill in that D minus up there.
We'll get the whole scale.
I think most of our outreach at this point has been absolutely general. If I really look at our material, it's probably really geared to the idea of sending a check. But that's kind of really where we are. We did not do anything that I would say is really any targeted as sit down and talk to the guy, but not on a broad basis.
Okay. Yes.
The Village of Irvington Open Space Committee was able to acquire through a $3 million bond issued referendum. We were able to acquire about 50 acres of preservation, open space, all wooded land, wonderful habitat, streams, springs, wetlands, and we're in the process now of we have an open space committee that identifies properties for acquisition. And if you run out of money, so conservation easements, it's been great working with the Westchester Land Trust on asking people, trying to convince people to the benefits of conservation easements on their property. So we're very densely populated, we have very little available space, and we feel the best way to accomplish that is through conservation easements, working with homeowners, preserve, what's on their property.
Okay. That's great. We've got a good range there. Unless somebody is dying to tell us their grade, maybe different than what we've already heard, we're going to move on. A few people came in after we did introductions, so those of you who came in, would you just say your name and your affiliation? Who are the newer folks? Certainly those in the background.
Hi, it's actually Jared and Nan Burlington. We're just a member. We're from the Burlington Institution. We have a bird at our backyard where we have like the feeding and everything. We feed the birds there. She likes sitting and watching the birds, so we have a bird. So we give the Burlington Institution give us a B+.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else who didn't introduce themselves yet? Okay. Okay. This is typical. You're no different than other groups we work with. I would say, Bill, by the end of this project, they should at least be at a B and move into an A, right? So maybe we'll do a little poll at the end of the H2H project period.